April 18th meeting to session, and welcome everyone who is here in person and those at home watching on YouTube. As is customary for us, we will start with a prayer and a pledge, and I've asked Commissioner Ted Godwin to lead us in the prayer and Commissioner April Stevens to lead us in the pledge.
Please stand. Let's pray. Father God, we're thankful for the blessings of this day. We're thankful for the blessings of the rain, Lord, and for the blessings of this spring in Johnston County. As we come together tonight to be about the county's business, we ask for your guidance and wisdom. Empower our board here to make good decisions, have courage, conviction, and do things that are in keeping with your will. Forgive us our shortcomings. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be seated. I would like to recognize at least one elected official in here from Four Oaks, Mayor Vic Bedlin. And we have I don't know if it's Mayor Emeritus or former Mayor Linwood Parker from Four Oaks is also here as well. So with that, we'll move on to the agenda. Gentlemen, we have first item is approval or discussion of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda's approved. Next up is the consent agenda items, and we have, I don't think that's 8 or 10 on there. Approval of our minutes from our strategic planning session, additions to the DOT system, some budget revisions for social services, several fire district related appointments, and approval of the fiscal budget for 2022 for HAP, Parks and Greenways and Open Space. I'll get that out right in a minute. Transfer from property from City of Raleigh, public utilities, an amendment there, and also another amendment to a professional services contract. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the consent agenda be approved as stated.
Second.
All right, do we have a motion and a second? Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved. All right, now is I'll call for public comments. If there's anyone here or out in the hall wishing to address the board on an item that is not on the agenda, please come forward at this time and state your name and your general area where you're from, your town or your community. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to address the board, and at all times should maintain proper decorum and make their comments in a civil manner. We'll remind you that this is an opportunity for the public to make their comments and for the board to listen, so there will not be any response or any any answers to impromptu questions. So if there's anybody here from the public willing to speak, please step forward now. All right, with that moment of awkward silence, Paula, did we have any emails to read? Okay. Well, next up on the agenda is the I-95, I-40 Crossroads of America Economic Development Alliance update. And looks like Mr. Harold Keene's going to step forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board. April, it's nice to see you sitting there tonight. I have with me Reed Williams, the president of the I-95, I-40 Alliance, and also the mayor of Four Oaks, Vic Medlin, and I can't say my words. Somebody referred to me after I served as chairman of the North Carolina Bankers Association for a year. He told me I was the best that they'd ever had, and then the week after I was no longer chairman, he called me the past go-to blank chairman, so I won't say that tonight. But we're glad that the brains of Linwood Parker is with us tonight. So we just wanted to do a brief update. Some of you know informally what we're trying to do down in the southern end of Johnston County and the northeastern end of Harnett County, but the mayors of Four Oaks, Benson, and Dunn got together and decided that they needed to make some efforts to gain the quality of jobs that we all want and need. We know from some of the positives that are happening in Johnston County that commercial industrial creates the tax base that we need for the quality of life that I think our citizens want, demand, and deserve. And so for our efforts to make that happen in the southern end of Johnston County, we have put together the Crossroads of America. I'm here because out of a moment of weakness, they asked me to be the chairman to begin this effort, and so I'm trying to put my efforts in to see that it gets started correctly and becomes a real positive for the county. We have incorporated, we're thrilled to get started. With Chris Johnston's help through economic development, Reed Williams is already fielding interest and putting together potential sites, and we're off to a great start. One of the things I wanted to mention tonight, because as you know, all things lead back, you guys have the bucket of money there that supports everything in the county, and ultimately someday it always comes back to you. But one of the beginning efforts we realized was that we had to put forth some workforce training in order to make ourselves attractive to enhance people's desire to come. And so Linwood, I'm glad he's here tonight because he was involved in the very first workforce training center we did up at Clayton years ago to support the pharmaceuticals. And I think if he were standing here, he would remind you that the small amount of money that Johnston County had to put up to get that started and going has returned itself so many times over the years. And so we believe we're looking at doing a major building at Four Oaks on a tract the town has accumulated there next to the Keene Road intersection. And in addition to the training that we see coming through businesses and industry, we're working with Johnston Community College to move the workforce training center part of manufacturing. All their welding and all that stuff would come to this building. They have a waiting list of students to do that, the advanced manufacturing training, but don't have the space, and they're in an older building that really wasn't designed for that. And so this building would be designed and would allow them to increase that program by 50%. And so we have met with the trustees and worked extensively with the staff at Johnston Community College, and to say they're excited would be an understatement of the potential for the programs that they would gain from it. And so we believe that there's a lot of money available to help make this happen, and so that not nearly all of it will be required from local sources, and that's always a great thing. And so we believe it's the appropriate timing. It's certainly appropriate timing for our efforts as we're trying to get started. Because our alliance covers both Johnston County and part of Harnett County, there is a training center more directed towards computer and those kind of things being created there. They already have a space that the Central Community College uses there, and that will be upgraded and enhanced to create some programs there. You know, we're not far up and down this interstate, so it certainly works together for both the advanced manufacturing that we're trying to put together in Four Oaks, as well as the efforts that they'll do in Dunn. If you look at the interstate highway, the towns along Interstate 95, you all know that the household income in those cities is greatly below the state average and below the county average. And so to create the quality of jobs that we envision being able to do, there's land available down there, and Four Oaks already has an industrial site, as you know, and others coming, and so Benson and Dunn likewise. And so we believe that our efforts will be rewarded there, and we believe it will enhance the household income and give opportunities. Chris, I'll borrow your statement that you say how many 55,000 people get up every day and drive out of Johnston County, and more of them need to stay here. But we got to provide the quality of jobs. Reed, did I leave out anything you want me to say?
You covered all the bases, sir.
Well, and I don't even pay him. What a job.
That's why you're the chairman.
That's right. What kind of questions
Yeah, any
do you
questions?
have?
I have one, Mr. Chairman. That training center at Central, is that just south of Bowie's Creek there?
No, actually, it's in town, Dunn.
Okay.
It's an older school building that the city uses.
Right.
They use it at Innovation Center. They use it for several programs. And
Right, okay.
college also.
I would just say, I know you have made visits to other similar facilities, and I think you've contracted someone to start the design process. You want to give us a little update on that as
We
well?
were fortunate in the latest state budget to get enough funding to begin the planning process for these. We were given $1.2 million to do the engineering for both of these two sites. And so we're well underway with both of those. And we've made visits both to a couple of sites in North Carolina and also to Greenville, South Carolina. The engineering firm LS3P is the one we've contracted with to do the site here in Johnston County. And they've done numerous workforce training centers, and one of the nicer ones they did is in Greenville. And of course, those of you who've made a visit to the Greenville, Spartanburg area, you know what's going on down there. And you know, sometimes you have to look at perspective. When we drove down the other day, we met the engineer at a restaurant, a retail center there just off I-85, Greenville, South Carolina, and I asked him when he came, and he came in the very late 80s and moved there. And I said, what did this place look like when you came here? And he said, well, there was nothing out here. He said, my children's pediatrician was 2 miles down the road, and everybody in town thought he was crazy because he'd gone out in the middle of the country to open his office. Total upscale for us, a North Hills environment. Unbelievable for what's going on, but their center is about twice the size of the one we envisioned for here, but it's BMW and all those who needed that center, and they've done a fantastic job with it. It has spawned so much things, and I think the thing that I want to say, when we think of workforce training, and we're thrilled that we can create this and do it in conjunction with the community college and meet some needs that they have right now. But it's not just for college level students. It's for that training for those industries. It's that ongoing training. I mean, when we were there a couple of weeks ago, GE had some people in there 3D printing fan blades for jet engines and doing retraining and getting up to speed on all that. So it's amazing what it does for the industries around. And it looks like to me, if you have that kind of training available, it creates opportunity for other industries. You know, we used to joke about if you're building a restaurant, where'd you build a restaurant? You build it where everybody else had a restaurant. Why? Because most people don't make up their mind where they're going to eat till they get there, you know? And so you want to be where it attracts people. Well, you want your manufacturing and stuff where people are attracted to. The thing they've done, I guess some of us are old enough to remember when South Carolina essentially bought BMW. I mean, they gave away so many incentives to get them to come, and I think the thought at that time was, do they really know what they're doing? And when you see the result now, these many years later, you understand what they were doing and what it's done. What it's done is created opportunity. If a kid grows up in South Carolina and dreams of being an engineer, they can graduate, and when they graduate, there'll be 6 to 8 companies making them an offer to go to work. How wonderful. I mean, I think you would find that the number of engineers per capita in the Greenville-Spartanburg area far exceeds anywhere else within driving distance. It's unbelievable. And so we got to do the same thing here. Y'all know that I work for a bank, and because of that, we do a lot of residential. We were a savings loan back in our history, and so we haven't walked away from that. And I'm thrilled that we can make a great place for people to live. But the tax base that's created by individual house is not going to get us the quality of life that we have to have. We're going to get that by commercial and industrial, by manufacturing and stuff. And so that's our goals.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask a question if I could. It's no doubt the training center in Clayton has been a boon to that area, no doubt about it. The good thing there is the industry there donates the equipment that we train them on. You have Nova Nordisk and Griffles that are supporting that wholeheartedly, and it's paid off for them. If you're training for manufacturing, do you have any idea what type of manufacturing? If you start, I mean, do we have an industry that has contacted? Do we have any anybody in the waiting, or are you going to do basically welding and electronics and stuff that you have already at the college to a certain degree?
Absolutely.
So those programs will be moved down to focus in that industrial park area there?
Yeah, Mr. Braswell, I'd love to tell you that we had 3 people waiting for us to open this, but obviously we do not. And but you got to get it there in order to attract people and stuff. And the community college needs space, and so we're thrilled that we can work with them to create that. We've been reassured, Mr. Chairman, that from our elected officials that by them giving us the money in the previous budget to start designing these things, that they fully expected us to come back with a request, and so we're going to honor their faith in us by doing that, and we're working very hard to get the design work done and get to some cost estimates that we can go sit down with them. And but as they always say, they want to see commitment from locals, so I'm sure we'll come back to you. The good thing is we don't believe we're going to come back and ask you to make major commitments. It's not like we're going to come back and ask you to pay 80 or 90% of the building, but there might have to be a little skin in the game because that's the way they do things, as you know. But we're thrilled with the support we've received from them so far.
We know when you bring Mr. Parker, there's an ask, so. Any other questions for Mr. King? Just a couple of comments for me. The Greenville-Spartanburg area, I spent some of my younger years there in the early, mid-'80s, and there was, you drive on 85, and there was nothing between Greenville and Spartanburg. You hit Duncan, Lyman, Welford, metropolitan area, there was not much there, but to see what that's doing with this, but started with, I didn't really start with BMW, that was a big piece of it, but to see that area now, it is entirely different. Now, one thing I will say, you're talking about the southern part of the county, the Four Oaks and Benson. I think you've seen this board and the previous board make efforts to make sure that we see development along that 95 corridor. So I think that, you know that we have a willingness to consider things to help that. We just, we had natural gas, and now we have another project bringing it up through Benson. So, we're connecting there, which I think will make a difference in the long run. But, know that even though we're all not from that area, I think we all support, what you guys are doing and trying to bring a workforce development center to that area and businesses to that area and to Johnston County. So,
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate your support. It takes all that to get it there, and we believe we can all be successful.
if nothing else, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Last month, we had some presentations for applications on the NC Great Grant for broadband. And tonight, we have two more companies here to speak to us. First is Conterra Networks, and then Lumos, I don't know if I pronounced that, is the next one. But first up, we'll have, I think, Kay Stevens, at least what's on my agenda, with Conterra.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am very glad to be here. I just slid to first base from Houston, Texas today, and it is beautiful and cool here, right, surprisingly. So it's nice to be here. I'm here to introduce, really probably to introduce Conterra Networks to many of you, right? Different than many of the great grant providers or partners that you might have talked to or will talk to tonight, of who we are, who Conterra Network is. And so we're going to start there, if you don't mind. I didn't know who's thinking. Conterra Networks. Conterra Networks has been, since 2002, a company that has built infrastructure, and infrastructure throughout counties and throughout school districts. They were founded on the idea of connecting schools with microwave out in rural areas where schools had very little connectivity, and they brought high-speed microwave at the time, connected those schools, and brought significant change to how those schools were able to operate. Shortly after that, in the next years, they worked with many federal programs, leaders in federal programs, bringing those with the schools and libraries, and built that infrastructure into fiber and started migrating those fiber networks. So we have a history of understanding wireless technologies, but early on, understanding infrastructure, fiber to anchor tenants. And if you think of how that grows, anchor tenants, schools, and libraries throughout a county, especially in North Carolina, how deep our network goes into your county. We have 163 miles of dense fiber throughout your county. We're going to look at it in a minute. But the key was really how that went out into the rural areas of the county to all your schools. But not only that, the investment that Conterra took to build the capacity within those networks. So the program that's funded the fiber to schools and libraries, called E-Rate, funded a portion. Conterra then would invest to build additional capacity with their own investment into your county, so that we ended up with a very robust network throughout over 200 counties across the nation. And looking in where we are in North Carolina, we continue to work with growing those and building more resilient networks and building higher capacity networks. As we then migrated in 2019, and looking at how we worked more closely with our carriers, with our partners, to build broadband and residential services on our network. 5G networks, we are a carrier's carrier network. We deliver the 5G services into these areas. We deliver their tower backhauls. We do high capacity, as I said, to our schools, to cities. And we looked at how our network was built and said our network is positioned, uniquely positioned, to deliver broadband into underserved and residential and communities, significantly different than some of the legacy networks that were built. So we started working very closely with our partners in our states and looking at them using our middle mile network so that we could distribute those further. In Louisiana, we worked very closely, and we were able to bring over $40 million to their state, working with their schools to connect and distribute broadband off of our network through the state. We stepped back and looked and said, we carefully can do this working with partners, but we have been working with our residential services, and in January, Conterra's executive team approved the expansion on delivering those residential services ourselves, under a different model, though. The model that says we have been delivering small business and medium business, enterprise, schools, learning, helping small businesses run since our beginning, 2002. And we want to distribute that network to our residentials built on a fiber architecture that will support high-quality services to homes, where we have small businesses operating, where we have learning going on, right? Where all of those take place now, and it will continue to take place, the network that runs those. So although our entry into this market is new, we come to it with a very strong focus. The ability to deliver high-capacity services, right? The architecture that our fiber networks are built. We've been delivering residential for a number of large providers and small providers in rural America throughout this, and Conterra's corporate offices in Charlotte. So as we looked at our counties and said, where will we do this work, we looked at focusing in North Carolina first to distribute those services. So then the next thing we did is look at our counties to say, where do we have the best networks to continue to grow, that have the growth with us, and we looked at Johnston County. So as I said, we have over 200 counties that we have similar networks to, but the ability to deliver the service in Johnston County is why we picked you, and we hope that we can build the best proposal so that you can win a great grant and bring it to Johnston County. So under this slide, I think the real key is that we're carrier class, that we have been building these networks to distribute these high-quality 5G next-generation networks for years, bringing this residential service in a different business model, having a different expectation of what those services need to be at home. We are people-driven. Our differentiators is we're local. Our people are local. Our networks are local. We have network operation teams that are local. We supported those, and we have worked closely with federal programs to be innovative and bring those to your county. So the next slide. We have fiber networks in all of these counties that are deep, to every school, to libraries throughout the counties. We continue to invest so that we close the ringed architecture so that it's sustainable, that our network architecture actually changes the way we can deliver services, right? The quality of our services that we deliver. And so we look at these counties, and these are our eastern North Carolina counties. And then, excuse me, next one. And then, I'm sorry the slide is a little difficult to see, the blue and the green. But the blue is our fiber throughout your county. And as I said, the quantity of fiber that we have, 162, it's nearly 163 actually, miles here that are built. But it's also the density of that fiber in those fiber capacity. Commissioner, I think I actually heard to say that sometimes there's fiber at the end of the street, right? And somehow we don't have it in our homes. You have fiber running through a community, and no one stops in those communities because that fiber is long-haul fiber, or the density's not there. There's lots of economic reasons possibly, but sometimes it's just technical. There's not enough fiber capacity, right? There's not a splice case. When you look at our fiber, we've got not only a lot of fiber in all of those blue lines, but we have a lot of access to that fiber so that we can go in, and if it's at the end of the street, we have access at the end of the street. We've been delivering to small businesses, but the ability now to take those splices and then distribute that into those communities. We feel like the network itself will facilitate it better, and then as we invest and close these, we'll be able for not just the short term, but the long-term delivery of next generation services to Johnston County. So the next slide is we all know these dots, don't we, Johnston County? Those yellow dots are y'all's underserved locations, right? Mm-hmm. that you have identified in the GREAT grant. By the way, I'm working in a number of states. I just commend North Carolina on their mapping so that we can all of us that come here can look at how we serve this and look at those locations that we need to serve first, the unserved locations. These locations by maps say they have less than 25.3. If you notice our fiber, in our proposed, when we started doing the design for Johnston County, in two of the scenarios that we built models, we didn't have to build any middle mile fiber. And that means that our investment goes to the last mile and into closing design and brings that into higher quality of service delivery. So we had no investment that had to go into middle mile because our fiber that's already been invested in Johnston County. There was areas where we needed to extend, but it was minimum of that extension to bring that to the next level. So we were able to, with a minimum investment into anything except for the last mile cable, the one that can connect those homes, to connect 33, 36 out of the 4,600 plus homes that are unserved in your county. I do not think you've got the updated slide, but we'll see if the next one is. I am so sorry, it says add updated map. The map that I was going to show y'all is the rest of the dots on yours, and I do have it available, and I'll be glad to send this to you. The rest of it I think is significant. I was very surprised to see it. It is the dots on that map that don't have fiber to them today to the homes. So all of the carriers today report to the 477, to the FCC on a report twice a year, and it shows the type of service they deliver and how it's delivered. So when we started researching the entire county of how we could bring broadband not only to your unserved, but to your underserved, and then bring competition and options to areas where we feel like that we have a great network. And when we ran those dots, I think you will be very surprised to see the density of the red dots, and there happen to be in red, that are in your county that have no fiber services delivered to them today. So in a county that is one of the fastest growing in North Carolina, right? And so how then to look at our network then to not only serve these. You also might notice, and I'm sorry it's difficult to see, but how that when we're building, we will continue to build higher, those rings, what I'm saying, closing, building smaller and smaller. The investment that Conterra is going to make is in line with the BEADS funding that's coming in the next generation of funding from the infrastructure fund, where it focuses on reliability of broadband services in the short term and the long term, right? One of the things we know is that we have broadband, but sometimes it's not reliable. It doesn't work if too many people are on, right? And I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce my partners in crime here, Blake and Kay that are with me. We do so much Zoom, and I live in Houston, Texas, and sometimes, depending on who's on the network, my broadband will go out, and they know this. They're always like, we are moving you, right? We're so tired of bad broadband, right? And there's lots of reasons it happens, but I think that we've all experienced it. So how do you keep that from happening? How do you build a network that can support gig services, 100, those speeds that we talk about, symmetrical speeds to every home, no matter how many people are on the network, that everyone can get the quality of network that they paid for. And that's architecture, that's technology, and the ability to deliver it. I think that your state has done such a great job that as they evaluate those grants, that they're going to be able to see that. Who's building a network that will be able to deliver short-term and long-term needs. So finally, we've been successful delivering strategies in services. And it really is based on fiber, right? Fiber is king. Now, fixed wireless and next generation wireless and 5G wireless is working on our network, and we believe there is a place for it. North Carolina versus West Texas. West Texas is much easier, right? And then you think about how we're doing. I've already mentioned the resiliency, but the other thing I wanted to mention is layering, that when you build a great foundation, 5, 10, 20 years, that you're able to layer services on those, and those services continue to grow. And we're going to see one of the fastest growth of next generation services, and I would put this out to anyone for discussion, than we've ever seen, because we have so much money coming into the industry and so much private money matching that into the industry, which is driving applications, and all these things we've talked about for years are finally coming to the market, that now we'll have a network to deliver those. So with our network architecture, we feel like we can do this not short term, but long term. Next is we have a very successful history of partnering and delivering what we say and doing what we commit to do, right? And we do not have RDOF funds. I'll just throw some things to you. And I applaud the guys that do, but they have a lot to do. And they've got to deliver a lot of services with a very small budget in the next 4 years of the money they've done. We have not taken those monies except our E-rate money, and we have delivered on those networks, and now we're ready to invest with funding that's adequate funding to deliver the type of services that we need to deliver. And that's the direction we're going. Finally, I'm going to show you a picture that I love, and it's a simple picture, really. And it is based on how do you really build networks. And networks are built from the very core, as they're called, core networks, and then they grow. And as you notice, we layer services on these networks. But as we're building anchor tenant networks or any networks, the architecture to do that, to finally that we could deliver the services that we never knew we would need this quickly if it wouldn't have been for COVID. We've known we needed them. We didn't have the money to get it there in these rural areas. But when we're ready to go, we're going to deliver that level of services. How will you do it? And it is really this very simple picture that we take this back. We are very closely monitoring the growth of the internet, how it's coming into North Carolina from Atlanta and Ashburn, Virginia, and where that internet growth will be so we can deliver the best content to your end users. I did not, and I've sent it to you, so I think you do have the data. We did give you a proposal. We are developing the Contera's modeling of delivering this. We have the funding identified in Contera's investment. We're asking, and I, of course, applaud the county for also putting ARPA funds in, because when you do that to any of your partners, it's going to help them have a better proposal, and they'll get grant points. And the goal is to get the grant money. I believe one of the goals would be to get that great grant money into Johnston County, right? Yeah. And so we want to help you get that. And we're going to fight to put the best proposal in. But if someone beats us, it means that somebody even had a better proposal and that money can come here. And that's a commitment, because I think when we grow broadband, we all grow, right? Everyone benefits. So any questions?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your proposal, and thanks for coming here. You don't currently have any residential service in Johnston County, is that correct?
No, we do not.
Okay.
We do not.
So, in the yellow dots where the underserved is, I'm sure you would have to cross over other providers also to get there. So that would be correct, right?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. So you have the infrastructure for providing it to the schools now.
Yes.
And you do that. So is there very much switching to do to get from that to, or you have it written here to provide that service to our underserved? I guess you're prepared to do that.
Do you know, I think that when you provide schools to anchors, like schools, and think of schools. In your small schools, your small communities, the schools are probably your largest employers, aren't they? They have the largest number of people on a network, larger than most corporate 500, right? If you think of Exxon in Houston, there's not very many of those that have 2,000 people in a corporate office, right, at one time that are logging on the internet to download and stream and do things. Schools are a very high density delivery of services, and they're different, and it takes a lot of network to do that. Small businesses that we also focus on, delivering that network service is different, right? But it's based on our anchor tenants that use a lot of bandwidth in your communities, right? And then looking at your businesses and how they use business different, bandwidth and network differently. And it's really to expand that small business experience into the home, that where we're taking a large capacity. Now, what you said, our network's going to cross other providers, and we are looking at how we bring options. Because you know what, we all know that when Google Fiber introduced that they were coming to Kansas City, you know, the very next year, Kansas City became the most improved broadband city in America. And Google Fiber hadn't run one pair of fiber yet, because everyone stepped up, right? And so I think when you bring options and competition to the markets, then we think that, one, that there's room for competition, and that we can deliver a different service that has a good story. So we will cross those with a business model to go service those homes we cross. So I think of your homes as unserved, first by the grant, underserved, which I think that we can look for how the CAP money is going to come, and how they're going to look at underserved areas that we may look at further. If not, we've identified unserved. Underserved are non-fiber-based services that we feel like don't have the scale for long-term. And then you're served where we look at competition, and then where we have the best opportunity to bring value to your county.
I tend to agree with you. The more competition will be better. I think there's many examples where internet and broadband coverage would be available to folks, and sometimes it's just half a mile down the road. It's not extended because of economics, because, in the rural area, there's not going to be 300 houses to hook up to. So,
Do you know, we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for COVID, thinking about how we were going to solve this broadband problem. I started in 2019, and the funds just weren't there. So rural co-ops were working to do it, but the providers that had the network there couldn't justify doing the upgrade for it to make the money work for them to be profitable, because it has to be profitable for them to invest. So we just couldn't get there. It's not that COVID brought on the broadband problem. The broadband problem's been there. I have been working with rural broadband since 2014 and 2015 when I went out. I worked in metro broadband environments and went out to solve the rural broadband problem. And I went, wow, this is our problem, right? It's a hard problem. Now we have the funding to do this and doing it right, and doing it right. So on the other side of all of this, don't you want to look and know we did it right? And that in 3 years, in 5 years, we're not right back where we were. The one thing none of you want, is in 5 years, when we need more bandwidth, and we really do have smart communities, and we want your rural communities to have smart communities and security, and be able to run security cameras at their home, right? And then look what's going on, right? On those security cameras, but you can't do it because you don't have enough bandwidth. In 5 years, I don't want to be at the same place that we are now, do you? And it's going to take who's got the investment to build the infrastructure that will scale in 5 years and 10 years, right? If you would like, we have worked so carefully with these counties that have partnered. So just near us, down south, Pickens County, we built a network. We started partnering before COVID with the local provider. It was a rural co-op and the ILEC. And we started building their services on our network and delivering it. And I called their VP of Economic Development and their service delivery and said, Zach, how's it doing? And he said, we could have never done without Conterra's network. The quality of that service, building off of it, working with you, been wonderful. And that's when we were working with our partners to do it. But we still had a layer of doing that, right? And you said from doing it ourselves. So we're not going to do it ourselves in 200 counties. We're not trying to go win the awards for all of those counties. We want to do it where we can do it and make a difference in the county and grow those services. So we are going to be specific on what we're doing.
one final question. Are you making presentations in other counties
Yes.
here in
Five.
North Carolina? 5.
Other counties that we're focused on, right? We have some that we feel like that our network could do it. I don't think that they're as attractive as the counties where we have the density. You know, the architecture that we were talking about, where our service is, where our knock is, so that we can go, here's the level of service we can bring today, right? And the quantity of homes we can touch today, right? That sit right on our network. That we don't have to go build middle mile. That we can touch today. So if we look back at that picture, and I definitely could expand this, if there's no turquoise dots, there's no middle mile. It is all drop cable. So it's drop cable to drop cable off our network, because our network runs and we had enough access to that network we could go down those streets. So the GREAT grant doesn't fund middle mile unless it's servicing laterals. And so we do realize that we're going to have some middle mile development. The other thing we're also doing is we're trying to combine the best connection of our total 3,300 plus DOTS locations so that we can build the best GREAT grant. And then Conterra's investment to do that. So as much as we can, and y'all have such good direction here working on y'all's broadband, I applaud. The other thing I do want to bring up quickly. Do you know that I don't know another state that has as boldly stated as North Carolina has stated that in about 2025, which is just around the corner, that you will have 100% of your students as a goal connected on broadband subscription, so that all students have equity in learning. That's a very big, bold goal, isn't it? And we've been a part of getting kids connected and working with those schools and helping schools use programs like the ECF fund, bringing ACP so that they can use both those funds to get those kids connected, working with libraries to do that. And so I think we have as good a history as anyone that's been providing residential services in bringing those support services to your schools and libraries to be able to leverage those funds effectively. And so the history of doing that we want to bring to those, but we can't do it to 100 counties. We can't do it while we're building all this other. We can do it to the focus counties that we're going to work on.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I hope I can state this right. I live between Selma and Micro in a rural area. Micro has 3 schools. Selma has 2 schools. Highway 301 connects those 2 communities. I live 1.1 miles from Highway 301. There's fiber on 301. There's not fiber on my road. I have to take a Zoom call like this with a satellite dish. I don't think when these servers, when these providers give their reports that my area is underserved or unserved, because it's there, but it's not on my road. So I think I would be excluded from the thrust that these programs are doing. And whoever it reaches is going to be a great thing. But the people on my road, I don't think it's going to be reached by this. Tell me if I'm wrong.
I will send this to you, and I have it with me today. When you're one of those homes that's not served by fiber, now, it may show you as served.
That's right. And our
Right,
zip code
but
is
you're not
served.
served by fiber. Your location is not served by fiber.
Right.
We were so surprised to see the pink dots that were not served by fiber. The other thing is, and we know this, and it all comes economic, I'm trying not to be critical, that things are reported and saying we serve this area, and as a nation, we know that our national broadband maps are wrong. We know they're wrong. And North Carolina, that's why you have that dots that say, they're the pink areas that say these are unserved, but then you've got the yellow areas on y'all's NC maps that say, these show reported, but we believe they're not served. And then the surveys, the yellow, and I think you'll see the CAP program really looking at where funding comes to that. But then as we're bringing more fiber into these fiber communities that aren't, you're on those edges. So I think the whole momentum is going to make a big difference. But when, right?
Yeah.
So a question you'd be is, how many of those homes can we serve? And we do have the technical design down to the lines that have to come into the homes to deliver those homes. So the other thing that we would be glad to share, privately, we don't prefer in here if you can understand, that we've actually done the design to these areas we call fiber to the home areas. So we group them and then build the design for these areas based on density and then distribute on our network. So if you're near a school, then those areas are being looked at how we build off of those schools and around them to bring fiber to the home to those areas. Because that is the only service that we're going to bring. We're going to bring symmetrical fiber to the home service to the homes to run small businesses, entertainment, education in the future.
Good. Thank you.
Any
I have a
questions? Yes, sir.
In my district, it's very sparsely populated, predominantly farm in certain areas. And during the COVID pandemic, when they had the students turn in virtual school, a lot of those students could not go to school because they did not have access in that district. And I don't see a whole lot of indications that we're going to be, my constituencies pay taxes just like every other district. So they're going to be asking me, well, what's it going to do for me? And so I want to be able to answer them. Can you help me out on that?
Y'all are, and I'm so proud of my North Carolina geography, but now you got me. Can you tell me what area specifically of the county?
Ms. Stevens, would you mind moving back closer to
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
microphone? There you go.
Sorry, thank you.
You can see,
There
the
you go.
area of Princeton. Mm-hmm. You leave Princeton, you come straight down south. And
Yeah,
that,
right there.
and as you can see, there's a lot of swampland. It's like I said, it's very sparsely populated. But those people that are in that area have not had internet for quite a time, and they're asking, what, if you're going to invest this money, what's it going to do for us?
I would like to say that we need to be the entire answer for your county, and we may be a better answer than others, but we do believe in robust middle mile. So you can tell one of their goals in our bill And if you go back to the yellow dots, and the bill is to continue north, right? See where that area of unserved in the south central area goes? And it needs to continue north. And it needs to, for a number of reasons, one is just to build services throughout that area and also to connect those areas together so that those are higher quality network delivery. So from a county perspective and for county services also, thinking of how do we have that middle mile, what funding is going to help have the fiber capacity to serve off that, right? That doesn't exist today. We don't have it there today either. So when we're running, we can tell you all the dots that we can serve today, and I call them dots locations, right? And we can tell you how many and how far off they are from our network. And we can serve all the way on that blue down, but you have to have fiber infrastructure to deliver long-term capacity services. That's what it is. Even if you don't have fiber off, the reason why we can't deliver today, a lot of times copper, because it's too far away from the core, right? So we've got to have more fiber in that area. And as we grow opportunities, so one of the things is building resiliency on your anchor tenants. I mean, there's definitely strategies that funding will pay for. All of our networks, we work with our schools and libraries, that we continue to work with them to help fund that fiber, because there's ongoing, since 1996, we've had fiber funding, infrastructure funding for schools and libraries, of how can you help build capacity with competition and services to build fiber capacity in that area, right? I don't have the answers that you need, but I have the how do you get there answer, right? And then what are we working on today is I can show you when we send you that update to serve how far off of our fiber we have planned that are delivered into fiber service areas and how far deep they go in that area. So I can provide that.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I'm Polly Gifford. That would have been nice to tell you who I was, but I just jumped up here. I'm sorry. I am Polly Gifford, and I am very fortunate to have worked with Conterra, not with them for them, but with them as they built their networks to these schools and libraries, and then working with them pre-COVID and bringing these networks to their communities, and then working with them now, working for them now to help them with broadband distribution.
Well, I'm sorry I had bad information.
I'm sorry.
I did. Any other questions? I just wanted to make sure. So based on your presentation, are we looking at roughly 3,300 new services?
Yes.
Okay. And what was your project dollar total?
The total project dollar for those services is at $11 million today. And that is, yes, it's
Okay.
$11 million. We are still working on some of those details. I hesitate to tell you that because we're trying to cluster those in to get the quantity into that $11 million budget that we're working on. So we do not have that final budget to you at this point, but we are working on that.
Okay. And it's the same ask as the other ones, up to $1 million, or is your ask less than that?
Well, we saw, and thank you for the clarification on this. We are running those numbers. Conterra's investment, the $4 million the great grant will allow, how we get the most numbers so you can win the grant. And we've been working off your $1 million kind of base that we've seen. We may come back and have to say, and publicly we can send this to you, to say, to get the numbers that we feel like it's going to take to win the grant and get the budget that we think it's going to take, here's what we can do, here's what we're at. Do we need to reduce this to see what the county's investment can be? And so we are working off the $1 million today.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Any other questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm not even going to guess who's coming up from Lumos. I'll let you introduce yourself. So. And we will take action after both presentations, or maybe not take action. We'll do something after both presentations.
Sounds good. Good evening, Mr. Chair and Chairman. I'm Derek Kelly. I'm the Senior Director of Market Development, which is a fancy way of saying I work with local government for Lumos and North State. So if you see the confusion of the name, we operate under Lumos brand in Virginia, and then we operate under the North State brand in North Carolina. I'm joined with me by Joey Stevenson in the back row. He is on our market development team, and so he'll be the primary contact. His whole job is just working with local governments inside North Carolina as we build partnerships. And then Shane Ward is in front of him. He's our Chief Financial Officer. He lives in Clayton. And so anytime we can get one of our executives in front of their own government, we like to bring them out and parade them around. Joey lives down in the Dunn area, but he's worked in the industry in and around Johnston County and supported Johnston County for 20-some years, and so we're all very familiar with it. If my name sounds familiar, I was in front of you 18 months ago working on the great grant for CenturyLink that was successful, and we ended up winning that grant. During that meeting, I think it was asked, well, why isn't the project bigger? Because we did about 500 homes in that project. And the answer was that at the state, up until that time, it was limited to Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties. And they ended up opening up sort of at the last minute for Tier 3 counties. So we found the biggest project we could do and got that in there. And I made a personal commitment that I'd be back in front of you at the next round of GREAT to talk about more. So I ended up leaving companies in December and left CenturyLink and joined the North State family. But I wanted to make sure I did good on my promise, and we continued to look at Johnston County. My aunt actually works across the hallway in the courthouse, so Johnston County is near and dear to me. My wife's from Kinley, so it's a special place for us. And just to give you a little background, if the North State brand is not familiar, it has roots in North Carolina that go back about 100 years. So they started out as an independent telephone company in the High Point area. And they started building fiber to the home back about 16 years ago. And so between North Carolina and Virginia, we have about 200,000 homes on fiber to the home. And we are strictly focused on residential and small business customers. We're not worried about what you guys use for county government. We're not worried about the school systems or enterprise. 100% of our focus is on residential and small business. In fact, we were part of the Segra family up until about the September-October timeframe, and we ended up selling off that enterprise business that was really focused on the Mid-Atlantic region to the Cox family, and our board of directors wanted us to just double down on residential and small business. Before I go into our one and only slide, just give a little bit more background of our philosophy and really what attracted me to come work here when I was working at CenturyLink for the last 17 years is this thought around universal broadband. And so I think we're uniquely positioned in this state and in both states that we're interested in rural areas, but we're also interested in sort of our smaller towns and cities as well. So if you look up in Virginia, there's an area called the Allegheny Highlands. It's not really a county, it's more of a region, but we have 100% fiber coverage within our footprint. It's about 13,000 homes that are in a very rural part of Virginia that we have universal fiber coverage for them. And we're also partnering with Botetourt County up in Virginia, where we're going to hit universal coverage for that county within the next 2 years as part of some partnerships and also us putting in our own funds. And when we look at North Carolina, over the last couple months, we've made announcements that we're going and building fiber to the home to about 100,000 homes in our own funds over the next 2 years or so. So part of that is in the Goldsboro area. We looked at Goldsboro and saw that AT&T really hadn't built a lot of fiber in that city, and that Spectrum was there offering what they offer, and really saw that people are starting to struggle with fiber to the home. So we're going and we already announced that we're building to about 15,000 homes in Goldsboro, and now we're coming back and partnering with the county and going, okay, where are there opportunities for us to go and get to those areas in the county that are unserved? Because one of the trends I see happening, if you fast forward 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, is all this grant money is going into the unserved areas. And it's absolutely where the public funds should be going, is for the homes and businesses that are unserved. But I think what we're going to start seeing is there's going to come a time where we're going to actually have better broadband in a lot of our rural areas than we do in our smaller towns and cities, because there's a lot of investment going into fiber. So we're basically saying, hey, go move out into the county because there's actually better broadband out there, and we're going to start seeing tax bases erode out of our small towns and smaller cities, places like Four Oaks and Benson, and start seeing, hey, if I go out in the suburbs a little bit or out in the county a little bit, I'm going to have better broadband. And so that's where I think we're unique. There's plenty of companies. Google Fiber was mentioned earlier. You know, they're only looking at the Raleighs and the Chapel Hills and the bigger cities, and they have no interest in going out into counties. And then there's existing businesses or new businesses popping up that are going after grant dollars to say, hey, we just want to go get these pockets of federal funding or state funding to serve those areas. But I think we're one of the few companies that's going, we're interested in both of them at the same time. And so we're going to be investing more than $100 million over the next 12 months in fiber to the home, and those are our own funds outside of any grant funding assistance that we get. You want to jump to the next slide? We'll talk about Johnston County. So I was worried the dots may show up a little better on my screen than they do on a projector. But if you can see the difference between the orange dots and the green dots, we're going to do both of the sets of dots either way. What the green dots are ones that the state has gone through and identified. These are the unserved ones. But to the point earlier about the, I think it was your house in the Selma area where, hey, my home shows served, but I don't have access to service. We don't rely strictly on the information from the state. And we do our own local intelligence, everything from field visits to doing a bunch of searching of our competitors' websites, plugging in address after address. And so where you see on there that part of the great grant application is going to impact somewhere between 1,200 and 2,000 homes, we're actually pretty confident now the numbers moved to between 1,700 and 2,000 homes, because we are looking at a lot of those orange dots and realizing they're in census blocks that show served, but they're not really served. And so we're going to be able to include those in our great grant application. So the total project cost for doing all these homes is just over $8 million. We're going to basically split it out and say, okay, part of those are already or don't qualify for the great grant, so we're just going to separate those funds out, and we're going to invest them anyways. But for our actual application, it's going to be somewhere around a $4.7 million project. If the county is willing to participate and pitch in ARPA funds, it'll automatically max out the state grant at 85%. So the state will contribute $4 million of that. And all we're asking for Johnston County is a $50,000 contribution. And really, for that, it's more about the partnership points and making sure that all applications are equitable within the county, but then also making sure, let's be honest, with $360 million in the pot of funds, there's going to be a great grant application approved in Johnston County. I think what it really comes down to is if there's money left over, which I think there's a high probability that there's going to be funds left over, there's a chance for a second or a third winner within the county. And if you guys just say, hey, we want to support Spectrum and Brightspeed's application and not us and Conterra, our points are going to be less than theirs, and it's also going to be less than some in your neighboring counties or all across the state. So I think as a board, that's what we want to just encourage you guys to partner with us with $50,000. It's more about the points and making sure that we stand the best chance against all the other counties than the actual needing the $50,000 to make our project viable. And then I think what you'll see happen after we get this grant awarded, I think you'll start seeing very similar announcements of what we've done in Wayne County, where we start looking, if you just connect the dots, us starting in Bentonville, it was really at the Wayne County line where our project's going to end over there, coming up south of Smithfield and then coming down the other side of 95. And you can start seeing the cities and areas that we've come close to, and you're likely to see us start evaluating those areas to go and expand beyond that. And then on the heels of it, we'd love to see you save more of your money where we would only ask for $50,000 in this round, because one of the things about the CAB program is for the counties that received more than $8 million in ARPA funding, as the program stands today, they expect counties to give a larger portion or a matching portion. So with the CAB program, it's set up that the state, for counties that get at least $8 million in ARPA funds, will max out at 35%, and then the remaining needs to be divvied up, and it's sort of competitive between the county and the applicant. So there may be a chance where providers start coming in and saying, hey, we need $1 million, we need $2 million and $3 million to get to some of those hardest to reach areas. And the one area of the county that I'll say that we purposely didn't go into is that southern part of the county. That's where the majority of Spectrum's RDOF winning areas were. And the little pockets of customers or homes that are really unserved down in those pockets are really far and few between, where it was just a challenge to doing that one. But I think with more time, if we really started evaluating that, we could look at it under the CAB program. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, have you applied for this grant in any other counties?
Not yet. Applications are due on May 4th. We definitely are talking with some other counties and have some partnerships lined up, yes.
So you hadn't done Wayne County as a presentation?
We have presented and we've secured the partnership with them, yes.
Okay.
we just haven't hit the submit button. We're still gathering all the
Okay,
files and stuff. It's quite a lengthy application process.
sure, I understand.
Any other questions?
I don't have any questions, but I comment, I think both presentations tonight have been informative and good, and I congratulate both companies.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
And this time, if we would ask Jeff Brooks with ECC, who has served as our broadband consultant, and if you want to see if there's anything we should know about these two before we consider adding them to the list of applicants that we've approved. So,
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, listen very carefully to the presentations. I think that what was delivered tonight had a slightly higher level of detail, not to the detriment of the earlier ones from Century, Luma, Brightlink, I can't get their name right, or from Spectrum. I did like the fact that there was more of a focus on the eastern and the southern parts of the county. I also appreciate the fact that both presentations discuss the issues with respect to how this data is evaluated. You hear a lot about mapping, and as you know from presentations and meetings we've had in the past, we as a group, or us presenting to you, have talked about the inaccuracy and inadequacy of the FCC maps. North Carolina has made significant inroads, much more than other states, in creating more dynamic mapping algorithms to recognize where unserved areas are. And the fact that both presenters tonight referenced that and actually pointed to dots instead of census blocks, I think is important. Derek made a good point when he discussed the CAB program. That and the extension program, whatever they call, I'm not sure exactly what it is, it's like the extending program. So you're going to have the continuing access to broadband program that will be coming out this fall with a higher degree of participation required from whoever is putting money into the program to support a service provider. But there's also going to be an extension program. This kind of comes back, Mr. Commissioner, to your question, where, if you remember, we had this discussion late last year about the Swiss cheese of the county, where all these little holes we're trying to fill in. The state's allocating $92 million separate from the CAB program to perhaps represent an opportunity to close up those little gaps. So I think that's a value to just keep in the back of your mind. But those are my comments. I welcome any questions.
any questions for Mr. Brooks? All right, hearing none, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So just to remind the board and the public that at our March 21st meeting, we approved up to $1 million from our ARPA funds as matching funds for the vendor provider that is selected by the state of North Carolina. And the question before us tonight is, do we wish to add the two that presented tonight to that list?
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad we don't have to make that choice. The state's doing that. And I'm sure they've looked at the point system and how to best score. But I would think we would be willing to partner with any of these companies to bring this kind of service to our citizens here in Johnston County. So I'd like to see us go forward and add these two as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm sorry, glad you asked that question. That reminded me of something. I discussed this with Jennifer and Rick via email and also in person. And Jennifer will probably discuss with you the concept of an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, and a letter of support. And it's my understanding from talking with both Rick and Jennifer that you as a board do not have an interest in a memorandum of understanding, a legal agreement. The way it's expressed to me is once a winning bidder is in negotiations with the state, then you would entertain looking at any agreement presented to you by a provider. But I've had a number of providers express to me a desire for a letter of support that simply indicates, your desire to support a winning bid. And so it's not my place, it would be Jennifer and Rick's place to brief you on those discussions and their opinions, but I wanted to bring that up. So sorry I forgot that earlier.
Okay. Is that something that council or manager wants to address at this point, or can we? There we go.
We've been looking at the scoring criteria under the GREAT grant and talking with Jeff about those particular issues. And I'm of the opinion, given the fact that it seems to be the general consensus of the board to support applications as they come forward, that as long, from a scoring criteria, as long as we treat all of the providers that come before you the same, then as we move forward in the process, it will not necessarily have an impact with regards to their particular scoring with their particular Johnston County project. Now, certainly, could it potentially be less competitive than another county? Perhaps, but what we want to make sure that we do is that we provide equity and parity in the process, number one, and number two, we do not want to put the cart before the horse and commit to something in earnest before we know what the deal is, so to speak, because the grants may or may not be accepted as presented, or there may be changes to the grants afterwards. And so we have seen a few drafts of MOUs, and we have not been completely comfortable with those commitments at this point. And I know that we will hear from some of the providers that the scoring requires a written document signed by the parties and that sort of thing to score full points. And certainly we can provide a letter of support. We can provide that commitment that we would fund the winning proposal in an amount not to exceed $1 million. But beyond that, we would need to have some serious review and discussion of that.
I'm good. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a
Okay.
I'd like to move to include Conterra and Lumens as part of the board's action for March 21st to approve providing the NC Great Grant matching funds in the amount not to exceed $1 million from the county's American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds, for the provider that is selected by the state of North Carolina for the grant award.
Do I hear a second? Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
You know, I can see each presentation has been a little bit different and brings a little bit different focus to the county. But whether we get internet access to Smith's or Jones's is still coming to the county. So I can see positives for all of the companies. So I'd support the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have our Director of Human Resources, Lou Hickey, to give us a presentation on the compensation study. We'll give him a second to clear the room so they can.
I can't get mine open. It won't open.
Everybody's having laptop problems.
Yeah.
All right, let's proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and I appreciate the board allowing me to come before you tonight and speak on behalf of a pay range and salary study for county employees. The study that was performed was a hybrid review, which consisted of data collected and secured through the Mercer Group, some consultants, as well as data collected through the Institute of Government. Of course, the data provided us with guidance for determining the appropriate pay grade and the salary for the positions. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the timing of this study is critical as the market is continually changing and quite a bit for some of our occupations. So many of the classifications reviewed were impacted. Not all of them were, which means some of the positions were appropriately paid as well as in the appropriate pay grade, so which was a good thing. But there were some that were impacted significantly. There are, in addition, a few unique positions within the county, and those positions would be reviewed with the department heads should we be able to move forward with this implementation of this plan. Classifications were impacted due to pay adjustments that were built upon one another. An example of that would be if we brought in a basic then the basic would be impacted, as well as the paramedic, lieutenants, the captains, and so on, up till you get to the top layer of that classification. So there was some of that was going on as well. So we have approximately 10 to 12 employees that would be receiving an increase that the state could potentially look at as pension spiking. And basically what that means is that the salary would increase more than what their potential contributions would be to the system, and there would be a deficit in there. And if there's any deficits, they would come to the county to make up that difference. Should the board approve implementation of the study, the next step would be for me to meet with the department heads, review the impacts of the salary study, and address any oversights that there may be. The county does have quite a few positions that are one-off type positions, and I think it's critical to get the input of the department heads and to where they believe they should be placed within their organization based off of duties and responsibilities. The cost, or the approximate cost of implementing this program, would be $6.5 million, with some reimbursements from state agencies of approximately $600,000, and that cost does include the fringe benefits that would be associated with it. So, and I am here tonight to respectfully request approval of the implementation of the pay range and salary study.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say I've talked with Ms. Hickey on several occasions about this, and I think they've done a very good job in trying to be as thorough as possible. It is a moving target because of the market the way it is now, and things are happening daily in local government all over North Carolina, and I guess probably all over the nation. But I think this is a great start and something that needs to be done to take care of our employees and make sure that they're where they should be. That being said, I'll make a motion to approve the 2022 pay range and salary study summary guide, and authorize the County Human Resources Director and County Manager to implement the guide with the flexibility to make further adjustments as needed, and waiving Article 3, Sections 1 and 2 in the Johnston County Personnel Policy as it applies to the in-range adjustments for the purposes of implementation of the 2022 pay range and salary study. And additionally, that going forward, that every position in the county, 50% of them would be studied one year and 50% of them would be studied the next year, so that every other year we would be studying half the positions in the county, so that we don't ever find ourselves in this position again down the road.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I've got a lot of questions.
Yes, sir.
I wish I'd have had a chance to ask it before at the end
You
of the
got a chance
presentation.
now.
That's right.
Is there any way to feasibly get around this thing with the treasurer's rules about the spiking? Is there any way we can gradually phase it in to avoid that?
With the pay adjustments, I think if we did anything like that, we're going to continue to battle trying to recruit and retain employees.
It seems a catch-22, you know.
Yes, sir. It definitely is, and not that this will make anyone here in Johnston County feel any better, but the other counties that are doing very comparable things, they're faced with the same issue with pension spiking.
The parity we're achieving is compared to other counties or general industry in the local area?
It's other counties. That's who we truly compete with for the
Right.
majority of our positions.
Right. Okay. It's a tough sell.
Well, I think what it boils down to is that, you know, you've got other county governments that are in competition for the same employees. And if an employee can go 10 miles in one direction or 10 miles in the other direction and make $10,000 a year more, I mean, you can't blame them for doing that. And in reality, Johnston County has some fantastic employees doing great work, and our departments are so well run, and the customer service levels are just off the chain. And so I just don't think it's a great idea to sit back and lose these people. When I look at Durham County and places like that, that's got, 30 and 40 vacancies in their 911 center. I'm looking at Mr. Renfro sitting back there. I mean, you know what's coming, and either we address it head on and make ourselves competitive, or we don't, and then we'll be the one getting the news story where we've got 30 or 40 vacancies. So.
people are breaking the door down to get into Johnston County every month. And at some point, I agree with Commissioner Harris, we don't want to lose good employees. And that $10,000 figure may be the one that broke the straw that broke the camel's back, but is there a middle ground? At some point, that employee is going to be staying here and not requiring $10,000, but maybe $7,000 or $6,000. I'm sorry, my conservatism is showing.
Well, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I think we have employees now that are somewhat disgruntled because they know as well as we know that the rates are available in other counties that they can go to, and that has to, at some point, affect their attitude toward their work if they feel that they're unappreciated or whatever. And I do know that we are behind, especially in a lot of our departments, especially environmental health.
Certified
to the
areas.
point that we are holding up builders and commercial and residential.
Right.
And they just cannot meet the needs that they're faced with every day, and so they can't attract people to fill the empty positions we have now. So I think it's imperative that we act as soon as we can.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, let me just say this. In any enterprise, it's a matter of balancing the revenue and your expense. We have seen tremendous revenue growth in Johnston County. There are many causes for that, but one of them is inflation. And because of the inflation that our employees are facing, the market requires that we be competitive. We're not raising salaries without a corresponding revenue to pay for those salaries. To take all this revenue that we now are getting in and not treat our employees fair would be unconscionable. And I very much support us making our employees be competitive in the marketplace. It's true in the private sector and it's true in the public sector of the inflation that everyone is dealing with the lack of goods in the supply chain. It's, but this is an important thing for us to do.
Any other comments? Yeah, I would just say, I know at our strategic planning retreat, one of the things that we talked about and one of the priorities what we set was related to our employees and the value that they bring to us and the quality of work that they do for the citizens of the county. So I think this is just following through as we establish that as a priority. This is the next step in following through with that and commitment to our employees. And as Commissioner Smith said, it doesn't matter if it's in the public sector because it's in the private sector too, and we're seeing this, we're seeing it everywhere we go. So it's much more important to me to keep the quality employees we have rather than to lose them, and then we have to go and find somebody without the experience or the training and maybe the quality and replace them with somebody who's not as top-notch as the ones we already have. So
I will agree with you, Mr. Chairman, and I don't want my comments to be misconstrued or misunderstood to be contrary to anything anybody said, because I totally agree. We've got great employees, and we need to be competitive and keep them and appreciate them. It's just my cheap nature to raise the question.
we understand.
I do want to clarify. I do want to clarify one thing too. That 6.5 million is actually general fund, so it does
Okay.
not include the enterprise funds that we have.
All right.
And annually.
Yes, sir, annually.
I think at some time, we're going to look at our user fees, which will bring a lot of that back in perspective. I know we're way down on our environmental fees and such as that, so I think we at some point in time, we've got to look at raising those rates too.
Yeah.
That'll help.
Generate some of that revenue
Pinch some of
from over here.
Some of the
Okay.
pinch out of it.
So,
It's the right thing to do.
yep. Any other discussion before we call for the vote? All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
Ms.
much.
Hickey.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have our Utilities Director, Chandra Farmer, to make a presentation on our 20-year capital improvement plan.
Yes, you may recall at the last board meeting, we presented the proposed 20-year water and sewer capital improvements plan, totaling about $660 million for the next 20 years. We talked about how obviously this is a document that will evolve over time. Things will change throughout the years, but now we've requested that to be adopted. I have not received any public comments related to the document. I don't know if any board members have or if there are any other comments. As of right now, we do not have any proposed revisions, and we're requesting adoption so that we can proceed with submitting applications for loan and grant assistance in May.
I'm going to look to Commissioner Braswell, as I have a feeling he has a few
I had a conversation
questions.
with her today, and I think that this is got a lot of foresight in it. I think it's been well thought out, and my concerns were quelled when I talked to her today. And we have a meeting tomorrow. We'll be able to understand better.
Is that a form of motion?
But hold on, I was going to make a comment first. Yeah, we'll save it for a second. But I just wanted to say that I agree. I mean, I'm looking through it. It is a plan, and I know it's flexible. We talk about reviewing it. I know we're in the midst of the first phase of our regionalization study, whatever form that takes. So as we see things develop in that, it may dictate changes to this plan. But I think as we stand today and knowing that we do have a deadline for getting in, if we want to get money from the state, that I think the plan, I'm glad it's flexible and we can and change it as we go. So, and thank you for your team for the hard work that you put into doing this. So, yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I didn't have anything this time.
I take a lot of confidence in Commissioner Brassel and Commissioner Lauder, who are, this is their wheelhouse and they understand this, and it's comforting to know that they have worked hard and studied and approved this plan. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, we approve it.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, hear none. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you can stand there and talk to us about resolutions for loan and grant funding applications.
Yes, as I just alluded to, the deadline to apply for the spring round of loan and grant assistance administered through DEQ, the Division of Infrastructure, the deadline's May 2nd. We recommend several funding applications, and keeping in mind that this round of funding will have some loan money and some grant money that is ARPA associated. So we want to get as many in as we can with opportunities, since we know that there's going to be multiple funding opportunities. The first project that we would like to apply for is our 210 wastewater treatment facility. This is the 4 million gallon a day plant expansion. As you recall, as you may recall, we do have a gap in some of that funding. We were going to use our local ARPA funds to meet that gap. However, if there's our opportunity for additional ARPA funding, we would like to kind of keep our names in that pot. We do also have loan SRF loan funding in there, and this would be an opportunity to potentially increase that loan funding and save some of the ARPA funding for some other projects we have. The second project is improvements at our wastewater treatment facility at the existing plant. This is preliminary treatment improvements and SCADA improvements. The third project is our Timothy G. Broom Water Treatment Plant 14 to 18 million gallon a day expansion. This was a project you may recall that we have started. We are consulting with a owner's advisor on how we want to proceed with this project. It may be a potential future design build type project, but we are looking at applying for construction funding for that. Also, our asset management and construction maintenance management system initiation project. This would be to implement this new system at our existing wastewater treatment plant and our water treatment plant. There is a special grant category for this type of project, so we're hoping we could score some points for that one. And then the last project we have is water supply improvements to the Cleveland Booster Pump Station. This would be upgrades on our suction side of that station to allow for additional water supply and transmission to the western part of the county, where we certainly will continue to have high demands. All of these projects are in the capital improvements plan that was just approved.
and we request the board's consideration of the resolutions that you have before you, and those authorize the submission of the loan applications, and they designate signature authority to Rick Hester, County Manager. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have on these projects.
Any questions, Ms. Farmer? And I didn't see it, or maybe I didn't hear it. What is the total of the applications that we plan on submitting?
Around 80 million.
Okay. All right. Do I hear a motion to adopt the resolutions for the 5 projects presented?
I move to adopt the resolution.
Here's a second.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Hope there's more grants than loans.
That would be great.
Yeah.
While I was up here, I wanted to mention that you may recall when COVID started and we closed our office for walk-in traffic and customers to come in and pay their bills in person, we temporarily started to subsidize our online convenience fees for bill pay. So when people pay their water and sewer bills, there is a transaction fee if it's paid online. And the enterprise fund started making that payment. I don't want to say it's waived because the company still charges that fee. We just started paying it out of our enterprise fund. And since we've opened our office back up for normal operations, we propose that we would re-implement that fee so the customers utilizing that service would pay that convenience transaction fee. This is relatively consistent with what we understand others are doing, and like I said, it allows the customers utilizing the service to pay for the service, as opposed to a subsidy from the enterprise fund. And we would anticipate doing that, starting that back June 1st, so we have time to notify our customers and let them know their options.
Are you talking about the bank card discount fees?
It's the online transaction fee.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, oh my goodness.
Do you know what the discount rate is?
Well, it's not a discount, it's the additional fee, and it is,
That's just jargon, banking jargon.
oh, okay, I didn't know that one.
We're being discounted. We're not getting 100% of the money.
It's $1.95 up to each $135 online transaction for the water and sewer bills. Then for the solid waste decals, it's $3.98 per $100 decal.
So
the customers will go back to paying that fee.
So it's not a discount because they don't have any air monies involved in it.
When you go in the store and use your credit card and buy $100, you don't see a discount, but that store only gets $98.
I understand that.
That's the discount I'm talking about.
Yeah, I have the store, I understand that, but this is a separate, it's a transaction fee.
Who charges it?
It's the company that completes our online
Okay,
transactions. So
I
it's
got you.
just for online transactions.
Right.
So if a customer walks into the office, they would not be subject to this transaction fee. Or if they mail a check in or do bank draft, there are other options.
Right. As I understand it, it's the same program that was pre-COVID.
That's correct.
Right. So do you need a motion, consensus of the board? Okay. So we need a motion, okay.